All right, we're 10 seconds out. Good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast, afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. My name is Matthew Keys. I am the publisher of a website called The Desk. I'm also a contributor to Fierce Video, and I will be the moderator for today's panel, Telcos and ISPs, the Big Video Dilemma. I'd like to take you back about 30 years to December 1992. That's when cable pioneer John Malone held a press conference in New York. And there he made a bold prediction that using new technology, cable television would eventually offer 500 channels of programming. Well, that will happen. That statement was made 30 years ago this December. And we're not quite living in the 500 channel universe that Malone predicted, but the genesis of his pronouncement still rings true today. We have more entertainment and information choices than ever before, thanks to broadband, internet, and streaming services. Roku, for example, I have Roku right here, offers 3,000 apps in their channel store. The free Roku channel streaming service has more than 200 linear channels. Other services like Pluto TV, Zumo, Stir, Tubi, and Local Now offer free access to thousands of shows, movies, and linear content streams. And there's plenty of subscription options out there. I mean, I'm sure you know some of them: Netflix, Prime Video, Peacock, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, and so on. All these choices have given way to a trend over the last few years of customers who are moving away from traditional cable TV packages in favor of cheaper streaming options. We know the buzzword. They're called cord cutters, but in many ways, they're not really cutting the cord because they still need broadband internet to access a lot of these services. So the cord is very much in some ways tethered to the wall. And cable TV companies are increasingly shifting their focus away from offering video and services to customers in favor of broadband and even wireless services. Today, we have three panelists who are helping to build out America's broadband infrastructure and one tech entrepreneur who launched a streaming marketplace that aims to help consumers choose among the hundreds of streaming television choices out there. Joining me today are Jason Cohen. He's the co-founder and chief executive officer of MyBundle.tv. Tom Williams, the chief technical officer at Schurz Communications. Joe Canavan, the chief executive officer at Bluestream Fiber. And Jill Canfield, she's the general counsel and vice president of policy at NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association. I'm going to give each panelist just a few minutes to introduce themselves, starting with Jill. Let us know who you are and what your organization does.
Jill Canfield, as you said, General Counsel, Vice President of Policy at NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association. My association represents about 850 family-owned and community-based telecom companies. So our members build and deliver broadband connectivity and essential services to rural and small town communities across the United States. To give you a sense of who they are, they serve about 35% of the nation's land mass, but only 5% of the residents. So on average, our members serve about 7 subscribers per square mile. And you can compare that to the larger companies that serve about 130 per square mile. So our smallest companies have 2 employees. Our largest have more than 400. So there's a pretty wide range of companies that represent. As an association, we advocate on behalf of our members at the FCC and on the Hill. And we also provide educational programming, training, and development to our member companies.
Thanks, Jill. We're going to get to you in just a few moments. I know Tom was next on my list as an introduction. He is still trying to sign in to our session, and we're hoping to hear from Tom in a little bit, and we'll get to him as soon as he pops in the window. Joe is the chief executive officer at Bluestream Fiber. Tell us a little about you and what your organization does.
Yeah, hey everybody, Joe Canavan here. Nice to meet you. So my company, Bluestream Fiber, we service homeowner associations, condo associations, and apartment buildings down here in the state of Florida. Customers from Jacksonville down to Miami, and I think this is an interesting panel to be on because the state of Florida has a lot of retirees. And you see very different demographic trends with regards to their video behavior. So, definitely a lot to talk about here. I think no matter the demographic, the trend is, continue to shift to a pick your own model, right? But I think there will be some folks hanging on to pay TV for a long time, at least in my state.
Excellent, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that as the panel goes forward. Jason Cohen is the CEO and co-founder of MyBundle.tv. He's also probably the only person on the panel that I've actually had extended discussions with over the last couple of years as he's built out his product. Can you tell us what you're doing and kind of where your product roadmap is going forward?
Sure. So thanks for having me. So we started the company a few years ago, and the idea was to help consumers simplify all this, right? The market being fragmented, whether it's SVOD, AVOD, FAST, and really the vMVPDs, and just the idea that there's a lot of different ways to get the same content that people want from traditional pay TV, but how do you do it, right? How do you figure that out? And so what we've done is we've partnered with broadband and cable, the broadband cable industry, including many who have their own TV service as well. We've got 96 broadband partners today, many of whom are members of Jill's organization, and they could range from 1,000 customers to 4.5 million customers and everything in between. And so excited to be here and kind of talk through it all.
Thanks, everyone. Jill, I'd love to start with you. 1 in 5 Americans live in a rural community. As a former newspaper editor and reporter, I covered a really small town where people are still relying on DSL service in many ways. That's their fastest connection that they can get. How many ISPs do you think are providing services to rural Americans? You kind of touched on that a little bit in your opening remarks. And what is the complexity of offering broadband and video services to the people that live in rural areas?
Well, as I mentioned, we have 850 members, and all of our members offer broadband connectivity. Our latest survey from 2021 says that 75% of the customers served by our members are connected via fiber and can receive downstream speeds greater than 100 megabits per second. And over half of them actually have access to a gig. That number has more than doubled in the last 2 years. Back in 2018, it was less than 25% that were served by fiber. So we're seeing a really big push to build fiber right now. And the subscribers, it's not just the build, the subscribership has increased at those higher tiers as well. Not quite as quickly as the build, but we're starting to see adoption at higher speeds. So there is significant progress in fiber deployment despite the challenges of serving rural areas. And at one time, you saw members getting into the video business because it was not just driving revenues for video, but it was also driving broadband adoption. But we're starting to see something of a shift now, and we see members starting to get out of the video business a little bit. Most of them are staying in. So in our 2021 survey, it said that 80% will continue to offer either cable or they offer IPTV service, and they'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future. The other 20% said that they already have plans to discontinue the service or are likely to discontinue the service. And the cost of content is the driver there. Really, the cost of content is high and it's increasing exponentially. And eventually the provision of video becomes a loss leader, especially if there is a separate cable provider in the area. However, that said, several of our members are the only source of video in their areas they serve. There is no other provider. They either were the cable provider originally, or they're the IPTV provider. And our members also serve areas that can't receive an over-the-air signal, too mountainous or too far. So as community-based providers, the decision on whether or not to offer video or to continue offering video is not necessarily always just an economical one.
Thank you for that. Jill, I just saw that Tom Williams popped in and is now participating in our panel. And so, Tom, I turned over the mic to everybody at the beginning and allowed them to kind of introduce themselves and what their organization does. And I'd like to do that for you now. So could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what Schurz Communications does?
Yeah, good morning, and my apologies for a technology guy not to be able to get into a panel. Looks pretty bad on me, doesn't it? Thank you again. Schurz Communications is a broadband provider in 6 different states around the country, from Arizona all the way to Vermont, north and south. And we service voice, video, and data products, also getting into things like smart Wi-Fi, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, surveillance, and other types of products as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment. I did want to dovetail off of some of the comments that Jill was talking about, particularly in terms of programming costs, but also being a lifeline for rural residents when it comes to especially some of their local broadcast channels. So a lot of people live in areas where they can't pick up an over-the-air signal. They don't have a terrestrial repeater in their community. So cable is a lifeline for them, as is satellite. And as we start to see some of these providers move away from the triple play package, they could really lose their lifeline. But it's interesting to hear that some are sticking with video despite the high programming costs. So Joe, as someone that runs a triple play company, can you kind of offer some insight into those programming costs and kind of where your roadmap is down the line, as far as, are you going to stick with video despite the high programming costs, or are you going to start to kind of push people towards streaming a little bit, or kind of a mixture of both?
Yeah, it's nice to see that worldwide inflation has finally caught up to programming cost increases every year. But in all seriousness, when I started in the industry, expanded package of cable, kind of channels 0 through 100, probably cost the cable company, $18 to $20 a month. This is back in kind of the mid 2000s, and we would charge $40, $50 a month. I think everyone felt good about that. The challenge today is, you compound that price at, 8% a year from the mid 2000s to now. And that same package costs the operator, depending upon the number of channels they carry in sports networks, anywhere from $70 to $100 a month. So it's impossible to compete with, the prices that consumers really want, right? Consumers want a price around $50, $60 a month for that. We can't do that. The rural guys can't do it. The big guys can, because that's about where their costs are. So it's just an interesting time, I think, with regards to, what happens. Programming costs are just going to keep escalating. So I think, in Jill's companies, the company she represents case, they're going to have to just pass that cost on. And if you want lifeline video from a rural company, you're going to pay, the prices, and retransmission consents getting up to, in the next couple of years, $6 a station, right? On average, if you look at some of the research studies out there. So you're talking $24 for a rural operator just to put that package of 4 local channels on there. So the rural operator is going to have to get at least $24 plus more. I think that, the future for companies that do not have a large embedded base of people who need and like to watch video and are willing to pay for it, I think Jason's company is a great way to offer flexibility where, hey, look, if you want our video service, it's through, this app over here. And if you want to get Netflix, go get that. We'll help you install a Fire Stick.
And that leads into a wonderful question that I had for Jason, which is, you started My Bundle a couple of years ago as a service that I think was initially intended to help consumers find different linear and on-demand streaming services and kind of bundle them in one place. And then you started getting calls from cable operators that said, hey, if you have a white label solution, we'd really like to join and do what you're doing, to have you come on board and direct our customers toward these streaming services. So can you talk a little about what My Bundle does and the benefits that it has, not just on rural cable providers, but all cable providers that are maybe trying to transition out of video?
Yeah, cool. There's the title, right? Telcos and ISPs, and I throw cable in there, right? Because it's super interesting. Even frankly, 18 months ago, we might have got from a video provider. Well, we're a video provider. And now that the last 18 months, we're seeing the industry sort of transition where people want, like Joe just said, and we're not partners, I would say, yet. We're not partners yet, but I like that. Thank you, Joe, for what you said. But no, the idea there is, right, how can I help my customer? And so from a very basic level, we have our customer acquisition tool, which helps people, where do you live? Answer a few questions, pick the channels you need, and no research, no channel, spreadsheets, putting all the services out there. We say, hey, Joe, you should get YouTube TV. And Tom needs his Bally Sports. So Tom, you should get DirecTV Stream Choice. And Jill, you just need HGTV, ESPN, and hey, maybe Sling Orange with the news packages for you. And the idea is that it makes it just easier for consumers to find out what they need. And really what the broadband provider cares about is broadband, right? And so it allows them to win more broadband customers from maybe the larger competitors out there. And what we're seeing right now is, I mean, there's $100 billion, right, that's about to be spent bringing fiber to unserved areas, underserved areas from the government, but also the large public telcos, right? Frontier, CenturyLink, two of our partners are out there investing, billions and billions of dollars to bring fiber to people that just got DSL. And then you have private equity shops that are investing all over the place. Every city that might have one provider is going to see some competition, which again, great for consumers. And so what we do is we help partner with these broadband providers who just want to focus on broadband, but also still help their customers and prospects figure it all out.
So you mentioned something that I actually had in my notes to ask Jill, so you guys are helping me do my job for me, which is that the Biden administration just earmarked $65 billion for rural broadband build out, according to my colleagues at Fierce Wireless and Fierce Video. That money is going to start trickling into the states soon if it hasn't already. I think each state's getting something like $100 million, with 5% of that earmarked toward administrative costs. So the majority of that is going to go toward build out. Jill, what are some of the challenges of building out rural broadband, and how is that money really going to help further that cause?
Well, I mean, that's it's a lot of money. It's $100 million to start, and then it may be more for your more rural states for sure. And the challenges of serving rural areas certainly is that it's just simply more expensive because you're serving fewer customers over a longer distance. So your return on your investment is less. So it's hard if you were doing it on a pure cost versus revenue basis to justify sending fiber out to your ranches and your farms and your more rural communities. So this influx of cash, if you will, is going to allow the states to prioritize getting service and good service, 100 down and I think it's 20 up, to your customers who are considered unserved right now. And unserved is receiving less than, if you're getting DSL right now, you're going to be considered unserved under this. And so the hope and the intent is that all of the consumers are currently unserved will become served customers, and then the rollover money will then start to target your underserved communities and your anchor institutions. So I think that, combining what we call the BEAD program, this new fund that you're talking about, with some other infrastructure things that have happened over the course of the pandemic are really going to start to address this, rural divide, if you will. Our members have been doing a great job of getting fiber out, but there are just areas where it's just too expensive to justify absent the government intervening, and the government has intervened. And I think we're going to see, at least one positive come out of COVID, and that is going to be that our students and our communities are going to have broadband at their homes with the ability to get it. We still have to address adoption, of course, but well, at least we can get it available.
That's excellent. Tom, I'd like to bring you into the conversation because your company operates broadband services across a vast portion of the country. And well, I shouldn't say a vast portion of the country, but in different parts of the country. What are some of the logistical challenges with operating in different regions and different states, as far as not only getting customers, building out the broadband infrastructure, but also retaining them and not losing them to competitors?
Yeah, there's several challenges. We're a company that's made up of acquisitions, and when you're like that, that means that there's a lot of different challenges, especially from a technology perspective. For instance, I have systems that are EPON, GPON, XGS-PON, fixed wireless, and DOCSIS. So having that many different types of technologies really isn't efficient. From a video standpoint, I have 8 different video platforms out there. So that causes a lot of different challenges, whether it's set-top boxes to back-end infrastructure. So what we've been trying to do is settle on certain technologies. For instance, from a fiber perspective, we're only deploying XGS-PON. And in fact, in areas that have GPON and EPON, we're overlaying those areas with XGS-PON. So we can get quite a bit more efficient on the access network side. From the video perspective, we launched a project. Some people know it as Project Artemis, but it is a twofold in order to bring our video platform into a single video platform. One thing that we're doing is we're offloading all video services to a third party, and we will be no longer running our video head ends. Now, what's interesting out of that project is instead of having 6 video head ends, I now only have 1 and somebody else is managing it. So we've deployed 2 systems, replacing all of their video with this feed. And what's great is we've been able to eliminate 60 racks of equipment and redistribute those employees over to the broadband side and looking at new and future technologies. So reusing that help. And the amount of power savings and AC savings has been just significant. And I still have 4 more systems to do. So we're looking at it, one, as being able to focus more on the broadband network, but also save some money on the expense side. The second part of Project Artemis is launching a new ABR platform, and it will be our only video platform. So I'll start decommissioning these other 8 different types of networks, and we'll only have one video network that's ABR related and be able to get the content that people want to them in the way that they want.
And what's interesting about that move is in doing some of the research, I came across something where you kind of helped developed one of the first set-top boxes, or I shouldn't say one of the first set-top, but you helped develop a set-top box when you were working with Scientific Atlanta. And so to hear that we're moving away from the set-top box, do you think that that is what's going to become industry standard over the long term, that eventually these clunky high-definition set-top boxes, I have one here, right, that these are going to go away for something like this?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, if you look over my shoulder, I have several generations
I noticed that.
digital and old analog set-top boxes up on my shelf here. I do think it's going to go away, but I think you're going to have some sort of box. So we are going to have an Android box. It's very, very small, about this big. And because there's a subset of customers, especially the older generation, that just want to have a box and they want to have a guide. And they want to be able to scroll through the guide just like that. And they want to be able to get to their content because that's the way that they've always been doing it. So we believe that there is a case for a box. The flip side is I think it's all going to go app-based. And that's what we're developing, apps for all of the different Android, Apple, Fire Stick, Roku, and all of them.
And
but
Joe,
the thing on the box that's important to us is it becoming an aggregator. So we do think people will take it because what we want people to be able to do is ask it for the office. And whether it's on my app or Netflix, I want that office episode to come up and be able to serve up that content in the place that it's at. And that way our customers have an easier time finding the content that they want.
And Joe, to bring you back into the fold, you're a triple play provider right now. Where's your long-term goal? Are you guys looking to stay with traditional video, or are you moving people over to streaming, like what Tom is trying to do, where it's kind of a hybrid model? You still have the box, but everything's kind of moved over to streaming into a third party.
Yeah, so we were pretty early adopters in IPTV unicast. Right. So we started doing the Android-based set-top boxes, right? Small streamers with managed platform back in 2018. Took it on the chin a little bit early on. But right now, we've really upgraded our whole video system to that TiVo IPTV platform. And the nice thing about that, and I think Tom's point is, we're not walking away from traditional linear video. We're augmenting it, right? We're aggregating it. So we're bringing in, through the deep linking of the catalog, through what TiVo does with their metadata, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, all those apps. And we're happy about that, right? I think what you're hearing from Jill, Tom, and myself is, we as providers are video agnostic, right? We're happy to work with folks like Jason's company or other people long term to not be the aggregator of video. And I think that ultimately, what happens for the consumer is going to be driven by whoever wins the HDMI port on the TV, right? Whoever wins that's going to win the day, because I don't see the TVs being the ultimate aggregator. There's too many different platforms, too many different softwares, too many different firmwares for the app makers to keep up with. But whoever wins that HDMI port is really going to win the day on video. And myself, and I would imagine Tom and Jill's constituents, we're all here to support them, long term.
Yeah, I agree completely with Joe. It is that HDMI. What we're trying to focus on, and I would bet Jill and Joe are doing the same thing, is keeping them in our interface, in our platform, to be able to show value to the customer, that they may be not using our video at the time. It could be Netflix, but they're in our environment, and that means we're providing a value to the customer.
And for Jason, because there are different platforms out there and different streaming services out there, I think the one thing that probably doesn't change as much on the consumer's end is who they get their internet from. And some of that may be because of choice, right? I live in a suburb. We have two. We've got, Comcast, and we have AT&T, and that's it. You go a little bit further down the road, sometimes the options are greater, sometimes they're less. But the common thread seems to be that most people don't switch internet providers too much. So I don't know that platforms are necessarily the thing that will keep people locked in. But one thing that could keep people locked in is if they have a platform like My Bundle where they can collate their not only their streaming services but also their bills. So I know you guys are working on some stuff along those lines. Can you talk a little bit about the billing part of your platform and how that could benefit ISPs?
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to jump on what Tom said before. He's across 6 states and large and been in the video business before, right? And so imagine you're one of Jill's 2,000 customer, small rural broadband provider. I'm obviously not going to ask you, Tom, how much did it cost to build this new system here? But the idea is the time and effort and the cost, what a lot of the industry is now saying is like, should we be investing that? Right? Do we need to? Especially if you're starting from scratch, right? If you're starting from scratch and you have 0 video customers and you're going to bring broadband to, 1 million people over the next 6 years, do I need to be the one providing the service? Or do I just need to be kind of solving my customers' jobs to be done? And that's really what we're like, that's the role we sort of play, is our tools in a co-branded fashion for that broadband, for that cable provider who still wants to have that relationship with the customer, who wants to raise their hand and say, like right now, Roku's doing it, right? Amazon's doing it, Roku's doing it, Apple's doing it. There's the providers paying 0 role for X% of the customers. And so that's where our idea is, helping around that discovery. And Matthew, as you said, right, the next step is billing. And not just billing, it's about integrating the multiple streaming subscriptions onto one bill. So you got to start somewhere. And we started with Sling. And so consumers can now buy Sling directly from My Bundle or one of our My Bundle broadband partners, right? But the idea is whether, we'll give you the value, we'll help you find shows on Netflix, Amazon, Disney, across your services. But really the end game is not just about discovery, but it's about making everything simpler, right? And we have a FAST that's coming. And so the idea is bringing this all in a very device agnostic way so that you don't get in the situation where I bought something on my Amazon Fire TV channels account, but now can I log into Showtime on my Roku or no? And like, what about my Samsung TV downstairs? And so, the concept there, probably similarly building apps across devices, we think is a big step for the broadband provider. And again, just to reiterate, even if you're a cable provider, whether you're small, medium, or large, your customers are watching a lot of Netflix, they're watching a lot of Disney, and maybe they're race fans and they want to watch, MAV TV, and you want to help them find where to get that content. And you don't want to invest a whole bunch of money to try to build it yourself, time or such. That's what we're seeing, I think, more and more, is just people saying, what business are they in? Are they a cable company or are they a connectivity company there to serve their company? And it's interesting, there's a lot of different viewpoints. We're definitely seeing more and more the consumer comes first. How can I serve that consumer? And just the last point I'll say is we think like 20% of people don't want to give up that remote with numbers, right? They don't want to give up remote with numbers. They don't want to give out that box. And so we view our job also as say, hey, is there a service out there that has that? Well, maybe there is, if that's what's important to you. And maybe it's the provider's own video service as well.
Hey, Jason, by the way, I don't even tell my boss how much it costs.
He doesn't want to know. Just keep it going, right? Like,
I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about network management practices, because one of the popular things that some ISPs have started doing is placing data caps on broadband internet connections. You know, two or three of the largest ISPs in the country have done that. I'm not too sure if rural broadband providers have done that just yet, but as we start to move toward streaming, right? It's already a trend. You already have people moving away from traditional video towards streaming, and they start adopting things like 4K video, or they start integrating streaming with their ATSC 3.0 tuners, which is, you know, it's going to happen because that's part of the foundation that ATSC 3 was built on. People are going to start blowing through those data caps. So, you know, let's be honest here. Is it something where video providers are trying to nickel and dime customers because they're no longer signing up for video packages or signing up for broadband, or is this really part of network management? And is there possibly some other better practices that could be put in place for the consumer?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think that where you're seeing that, you're seeing a broadband provider that lacks creativity in driving ARPU, right? So you have somebody who is, look, in our business, right? Part of your role is to drive revenue growth. And when you start to see subscriber stagnation, right? Like especially on some of the large guys, they got to get it from somewhere. So they're ending up doing that, which is really in a consumer unfriendly way. I think in the industry, if you are an ISP, what we have to do is start looking at our role differently, right? We used to be content aggregators, right? We all, for the most part, a lot of the lineage was either you were a phone company and you're an aggregator of phone numbers and connections, right? Or you're a cable company, you aggregated channels. Well, now we're broadband providers, and we have to realize what we really are is aggregators of technology. So how can you support that? So I think the number one way to drive both ARPU and customer satisfaction is really robust in-home mesh networking, right? That drives a ton of satisfaction. It drives down your service call rates. I think to Tom's point, right? They're working on cutting back on cooling. I'll tell you, you can cut back on 20-30% of your phone calls to the call center just by putting in and managing that network, right? So I think that's really where ISPs should be looking to get value, is when they provide value to the consumer and solve a technology problem that they get paid for it, versus, to your point, Matthew, nickel and diming them on, basically toll charges for watching Netflix.
And I'll just add that I'm not aware of my members doing that, to be honest with you. It's different dynamics in rural communities where you're based in the community that you're serving. But I do think that companies that are doing that do it at their peril, because you risk the regulators stepping in and telling you can't do that anymore. You're looking at going back to, net neutrality was struck down, but, well, the FCC did away with it, and then the court supported them. But I think you're looking at getting regulation to address those sorts of things if the providers keep doing it. So I think it's a risk. You're going to start seeing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jen.
Nope.
Several years ago, we did launch data caps as a way to obviously limit the amount of data people use, but also gain additional ARPU. Through time, we have figured out that that just isn't the right thing for our customer. And so at the kickoff of the pandemic, one of the moves that we made for our customers was to remove data caps. And then we made it permanent because we don't think that that's the right thing for our customers. And if they're paying us, X amount of dollars per month, they should be able to get the bandwidth that they need for as much as they need, because we don't know how they use their bandwidth on a daily basis. They have their needs, and we want them to be able to use it in the way that they want to. And Joe, I really appreciate the comment about aggregation and aggregation of technology, because that's what we really are today. And 20, 30 years ago, we were aggregators of content because that's all there was. And now as content continues to grow, we need to get back to that focus of content, aggregating all the different content and all the different technologies so that all of our customers have a place to go that can get the help that they need in order to become more technology focused in their homes and businesses.
The excellent remarks all around. We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to dive into a pretty heavy topic for our last few minutes remaining, which is carriage disputes. I think, My Bundle obviously it can help with carriage disputes with partners that integrate their white label service with them, and that if there's a service that drops a channel, they can just direct somebody over to another channel. But as far as, the carriage disputes seem to be becoming more and more common. We talked a little bit about regulation and how regulators could step in and remove those data caps. Do you think regulators at some point are going to step in and say that we need better transparency in consumer pricing for the programming that they receive?
I'll step in here if you don't mind, but that's something we as an association have been arguing for certainly more than a decade, probably longer than that. That the biggest complaint we hear from our membership is about the cost of content and the difficulty in negotiating with broadcasters and other content providers. And it's the thing that forces companies out of the business. It's just too difficult. You have consolidation in the market, you've got bundling, you've got subscribership tiers, all these things that are just driving up the cost to a point where it becomes a no longer profitable business line. I mentioned that 2021 survey we did of our members, and they said those that are exiting the video business, 97% cite the increased programming costs as the reason. And more than half also cite the difficulty in negotiating retransmission consent agreements for broadcast channels. After, say, a merger, we have members say that the cost of the channels have increased 150%, year over year after a merger in the industry happens, for example.
And to be fair to programmers also, because I know we have some of them that are participating in this forum, their costs have also gone up, right? It's expensive producing sports programming. It's expensive hiring good talent to commentate, right? Tom Brady just got signed to a major contract at Fox. So, that doesn't pay for itself. The money has to come from somewhere. But then when you start looking at the financials, right, you start looking at the quarterly earnings, you go, well, how much of this could they really cushion? How much of this is really going to programming? And the answer is, a good chunk of it is, but perhaps having some kind of transparency might be something that also enables consumer choice, right? As we're looking toward ISPs becoming, partners in pointing people towards streaming services, that could help accelerate that trend, perhaps, or could maybe even bring some of those costs down. So, Jason, could you talk a little bit about how your product could kind of offer a solution in that respect?
Yeah, and actually taking my bundle out of it, just the internet and an open marketplace does some good things for competition. So it used to be you had one choice, whatever came through that set-top box, right? And so it was really a captive ecosystem. But right now, I think on a previous panel today, I think there were some broadcasters probably talking about what are they doing in streaming. And so, what is a broadcaster? Is it my live local news? Do I need my 8 o'clock primetime, Dancing with the Stars? Well, that just went to Disney Plus, right? And so, and if I could get my sports, so I think what the internet, right, which is what, internet service providers are delivering, is actually going to give even more choice. And yeah, it's complicated, and sure, we help make that simpler, and Tom's platform is going to help make that simpler, and TiVo, right, platform to make it simpler. But at the end of the day, from a competition standpoint, I think it's like, hey, prices keep. This is what I say: 68 million people don't tune into football every Sunday, right? It's like 20 million. But when those prices are paid by everybody, eventually the people who don't watch football are going to be able to find Sling, right, or Philo, or Friendly. But if you need your regional sports network, maybe it's, again, you need the full package. And so I just think that there's an opportunity. The marketplace, is going to be figuring this out through competitive dynamics, really along the way. Again, I'll just say the last thing is I think that cable providers have a role to play. Like they're not going away, right? Some people still want the full traditional package. They don't want to change. Smaller providers, it's tough, right? It's tough to run this if you're a smaller provider when you have, a third of your customers and it's 300 people on a cable system, right? And if you're really big, does it make sense? Is it about ARPU or is it about profit margins, right? That's another way people are looking at it, just not about ARPU anymore. It's how much profit dollars am I moving across the line, and how do I not, right? I'll just give the last thing. Many of our partners who have video, every time they have a rate hike, they basically, look, we're sorry, it's not us, it's the media companies. pushing on the price. And it's not the media company's fault because it's the sports teams, and it's not the sports team's fault because it's the players, right? And so you get to this point, but let us help you find a cheaper solution, right? Let us help you find something that works for you. Yeah, Joe, sorry.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think that the challenge is not price, right? I think ultimately, if you look across, at least in the States, right, the average household's paying plus or minus $100 for content per month, right? Whether that content is cable company driven or over the top or a mixture thereof. Some of them higher, right? Some people might be spending, if they got all the premiums and all the Netflix is $200 a month. Some people, college kids stealing their parents' password, $0, right? But you're looking plus or minus $100. Consumers are fine with that price point for getting content. What they don't want is to get content that they don't want for that money. So I think that's why I think the whole premise behind Jason's company, right, was choice. And I think we're fine with that too. The problem for the cable companies is not that we're not upset with Fox about the rate for retrans. I'm not picking on Fox, right? CBS, anybody, or a national provider of content. What we're stuck with is we have to be the bad guy, right? We're in the middle saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, I know that you want to spend your $100 a month on watching, Troy Aikman and Tom Brady, do football telecasts plus get great movies from Disney Plus. But guess what? You got to spend that on all these other channels too. So I think that the big thing you're going to see the free market drive is not going to be a change in pricing, right? Content costs are going to do nothing but go up. Apple just signed MLS to a very lucrative contract for MLS, which isn't, even a top 4 or 5 sports out there in the States. What you're going to hopefully see the free market do is it forces all the providers to allow choice through, the MSO or through other aggregation companies like My Bundle or other type of devices.
Tom, we got about 3 minutes left in the panel, but I did want to give you some closing thoughts on the topic that we just discussed.
Well, I'll try to be as political as I can with it then. Programming frustrates me, and it surprises me that it hasn't been regulated sooner. Everybody wants to talk about the cost of broadband and it needs to be regulated and that sort of thing, but nobody looks at what's going on with the programmers. And these costs, Tom Brady signing that contract, 75% of my base doesn't care whether Tom Brady does or doesn't do it. And would a guy that would do it for 20 million do just as good as a job as Tom Brady? It's a name. And yet my customers have to pay for that. All of these bundling of all these channels together, and I can't just negotiate for a single channel. I have to negotiate for 20 channels. And if you don't accept my rate increase on this, a massive rate increase, like a 20 or 30% rate increase on this channel over here, you're not going to get any of them. And so it's very frustrating. Retrans is another one of these things where, you get taken up 20% and you ask them, so what's the change in programming? Oh, it's going to be the same programming. We're not going to do anything different. If you think about these sports channels as well, there was not a single new piece of sports, that year during COVID. Yet we really didn't get any rebates or anything back on it. They weren't spending the money on all of the sports. So it's very, very one-sided, and we have a hard time negotiating with that. And we are the bad guys. We can't even say, all we can say is, there's rate increases here. We can't even say whose rate increase is going up because we're contractually told not to. So programming is very, very frustrating to me. I know that wasn't very insightful, but
well, I think it actually is more insightful than you might give yourself credit for. And one of the things that I would caution is that we're starting to see that creep into streaming platforms too, where we're seeing carriage agreements and distribution disputes. Not to single anybody out, but there are some that are more prominent than others. And so hopefully that doesn't continue to be the trend, because I think that's probably the solution to a lot of video problems, traditional video problems that the companies that are represented before us here today are really trying to tackle and solve. Thank you, everyone. We're out of time. Thank you to all of our panelists today: Tom Williams, Joe Canavan, Jason Cohen, and Jill Canfield. Networking opportunity is up next, and then join us for our next panel here at the Nextv Series. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.